Class 10th, Chapter number 2, History. Nationalism in India. नेशनलिज्म इन इंडिया सबसे ज़्यादा इम्पॉर्टेंट चैप्टर इस पूरे बुक का। इंडिया की नेशनलिटी के बारे में जानना, इंडिया कैसे फ्री हुआ, कौन कौन से सत्याग्रह हुए, कौन कौन से मूवमेंट हुए। सो लेट्स स्टार्ट। नेशनलिज्म इन इंडिया. As you have seen, modern nationalism in Europe came to be associated with the formation of nation states. It also meant a change in people's understanding of who they were and what defined their identity and sense of belonging. New symbols and icons, new songs and ideas forged new links and redefined the boundaries of communities. In most countries, the making of this new national identity was a long process. How did this consciousness emerge in India? In India, and as in many other colonies, the growth of modern nationalism is intimately connected to the anti colonial movement. People began discovering their unity in the process of their struggle with colonialism. The sense of being oppressed under colonialism provided a shared bond that tied many different groups together. But each class and group felt the effects of colonialism differently. Their experiences were varied, and their notions of freedom were not always the same. The Congress under Mahatma Gandhi tried to force these groups together within one movement, but the unity did not emerge without conflict. In an earlier textbook, you have read about the growth of nationalism in India up to the first decade of the 20th century. In this chapter, we will pick up the story from the 1920s and study the non cooperation and civil disobedience movement. We will explore how the Congress sought to develop the national movement, how different social groups participated in the movement, and how nationalism captured the imagination of people. Point 1. The First World War, Khilafat and Non Cooperation. In the years after 1919, we see the national movement spreading to new areas, incorporating new social groups, and developing new modes of struggle. How do we understand these developments? Implications did they have? First of all, the war created a new economic and political situation. It led to a huge increase in defense expenditure, which was financed by war loans and increasing taxes. Customs duties were raised and income tax introduced. Through the war years, prices increased, doubling between 1913 and 1918, leading to extreme hardship for the common people. Villages were called upon to supply soldiers, and the forced recruitment in rural areas caused widespread anger. Then in 1918 to 19 and 1920 to 21, crops failed in many parts of India, resulting in acute shortages of food. This was accompanied by an influenza epidemic. According to the census of 1921, 12 to 13 million people perished as a result of famines and the epidemic. People hoped that their hardships would end after the war was over, but that did not happen. At this stage, a new leader appeared and suggested a new mode of struggle. 1.1. The idea of Satyagraha. Mahatma Gandhi returned to India in January 1915. As you know, he had come from South Africa where he had successfully fought the racist regime with a novel method of mass agitation, which he called Satyagraha. The idea of Satyagraha emphasized the power of truth and the need to search for truth. It suggested that if the cause was true, if the struggle was against injustice, then physical force was not necessary to fight the oppressor. Without seeking vengeance or being aggressive, a satyagrahi could win the battle through non-violence. This could be done by appealing to the conscience of the oppressor. People, including the oppressor, had to be persuaded to see the truth instead of being forced to accept truth through the use of violence. By this struggle, truth was bound to ultimately triumph. Mahatma Gandhi believed that this dharma of non-violence could unite all Indians. After arriving in India, Mahatma Gandhi successfully organized satyagraha movements in various places. In 1917, he traveled to Champaran in Bihar to inspire the peasants to struggle against the oppressive plantation system. Then in 1917, he organized a satyagraha to support the peasants of the Kheda district of Gujarat. Affected by crop failure and a plague epidemic, the peasants of Kheda could not pay the revenue and were demanding that revenue collection be relaxed. In 1918, Mahatma Gandhi went to Ahmedabad to organize a satyagraha movement amongst cotton mill workers. 1.2 The Rowlatt Act. Emboldened with this success, Gandhiji in 1919 decided to launch a nationwide satyagraha against the proposed Rowlatt Act 1919. This act had been hurriedly passed through the Imperial Legislative Council despite the united opposition of the Indian members. It gave the government enormous power to repress political activities and allowed detention of political prisoners without trial for 2 years. Mahatma Gandhi wanted non-violent civil disobedience against such unjust laws, which would start with a hartal on 6 April. Rallies were organized in various cities, workers went on a strike in railway workshops, and shops closed down. Alarmed by the popular upsurge and scared that lines of communication such as the railways and telegraph would be disrupted, the British administration decided to clamp down on nationalists. Local leaders were picked up from Amritsar and Mahatma Gandhi was barred from entering Delhi. On 10 April, the police in Amritsar fired upon a peaceful procession, provoking widespread attacks on banks, post offices, and railway stations. Martial law was imposed and General Dyer took command. On 13 April, the infamous Jallianwala Bagh incident took place. On that day, a large crowd gathered in the enclosed ground of Jallianwala Bagh. Some came to protest against the government's new repressive measures. Others and came to attend the annual Baisakhi fair. Being from outside the city, many villagers were unaware of the martial law that had been imposed. Dyer entered the area, blocked the exit points, and opened fire on the crowd, killing hundreds. His object, as he declared later, was to produce a moral effect, to create in the new minds of satyagrahis a feeling of terror and awe. As the news of Jallianwala Bagh spread, crowds took to the streets in many North Indian towns. There were strikes, clashes with the police, and attacks on the government buildings. The government responded with brutal repression, seeking to humiliate and terrorize people. Satyagrahis were forced to rub their noses on the ground, crawl on the streets, and do salute to all sahibs. People were flogged, and villages around Gujranwala in Punjab, now in Pakistan, were bombed. Seeing violence spread, Mahatma Gandhi called off the movement. While the Rowlatt Satyagraha had been a widespread movement, it was still limited mostly to cities and towns. Mahatma Gandhi now felt the need to launch a more broad based movement in India. But he was certain that no such movement could be organized without bringing the Hindus and Muslims closer together. One way of doing this, he felt, was to take up the Khilafat issue. The First World War had ended with the defeat of Ottoman Turkey, and there were rumors that a harsh peace treaty was going to be imposed on the Ottoman Emperor, the spiritual head of the Islamic world. the Khalifa. To defend the Khalifa's temporal powers, a Khilafat committee was formed in Bombay in March 1919. A young generation of Muslim leaders like the brothers Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali began discussing with Mahatma Gandhi about the possibility of a united mass action on the issue. Gandhiji saw this as an opportunity to bring Muslim under the umbrella of unified nation movement. At the Calcutta session of the Congress in September 1920, he convinced other leaders of the need to start a non-cooperation movement in support of Khilafat as well as for the Swaraj. 1.3 Why non-cooperation? In his famous book Hind Swaraj 1909, Mahatma Gandhi declared that British rule was established in India with the cooperation of Indians and had survived only because of this cooperation. If Indians refused to cooperate, British rule in India would collapse within a year and Swaraj would come. How could non cooperation become a movement? Gandhiji proposed that the movement should unfold in stages. It should begin with the surrender of titles that the government awarded and a boycott of civil services, army, police, courts, and legislative council, schools, and foreign goods. Then, in case the government used repression, a full civil disobedience campaign would be launched. Through the summer of 1920, Mahatma Gandhi and Shaukat Ali toured extensively, mobilizing popular support for the movement. Many within the Congress were, however, concerned about the proposals. They were reluctant to boycott the council election scheduled for November 1920, and they feared that the movement might lead to popular violence. In the months between September and December, there was an intense tussle within the Congress. For a while, there seemed no meeting point between the supporters and the opponents of the movement. Finally, at the Congress session at Nagpur in December 1920, a compromise was worked out and the non cooperation program was adopted. How did the movement unfold? Who participated in it? How did different social groups conceive of the idea of non cooperation? Source A Mahatma Gandhi on Satyagraha. It is said of passive resistance that it is the weapon of the weak, but the power which is the subject of this article can be used only by the strong. This power is not passive resistance. Indeed, it calls for intense activity. The movement in South Africa was not passive but active. Satyagraha is not physical force. A satyagrahi does not inflict pain on the adversary. He does not seek his destruction. In the use of satyagraha, there is no ill will whatever. Satyagraha is pure soul force. Truth is the very substance of the soul. That is why this force is called Satyagraha. The soul is informed with knowledge. In it burns the flame of love. Non-violence is the supreme dharma. It is certain that India cannot rival Britain or Europe in force of arms. The British worship the war god and they can all of them become, as they are becoming, bearers of arms. The hundreds of millions in India can never carry arms. They have made the religion of non-violence their own. New words. Boycott. The refusal to deal and associate with people or participate in activities or buy and use things, usually a form of protest.